Hey everyone, back again today with another episode of Gen Z Let's Talk. Today we're going to be talking about school. So, a lot of things have happened in education in the last 10 years, and even more things have happened in the last 20 years. I'm going to start by talking about the early 2000s. The United States was having a lot of issues with students who were 18 to 20 years old in the public school system, and they were in 5th or 6th grade. Because what would happen is that students would just fail over and over and over again. So George Bush Jr. passed a bill called No Child Left Behind. And the purpose of the bill was to stop this from happening, at least on paper. And even the name of the bill sounds good. What the bill ended up doing was making it so that way, if there was a student who was really struggling, a teacher wasn't allowed to hold them back for any reason. So there was the goal on paper, right? Stop students from hitting 18, 20, 21 years old and still being in 5th, 6th grade. And then there was what actually happened, which is that a lot of students who needed to be left back couldn't be left back. And a lot of kids ended up in 7th, 8th, 9th grade without being able to read a paragraph or write a couple sentences about something they read or how their day was. Now, in the grand scheme of things, this made a really big deal because being held back was the main way that teachers could motivate kids to try. If there's no incentive to try, kids really don't try. They don't invest in their education. And yes, there's always things that teachers can do to make school more fun, but without the ability to say this student can't write at a 3rd grade level, things got worse. People started graduating high school who couldn't write a resume. There were kids who were entering college and they couldn't read or write more than a few sentences. And this isn't a problem that's going to get better without addressing the root cause of it. And in my opinion, a lot of this did start with No Child Left Behind. So that happened in the early 2000s. Then, during Barack Obama's presidency, the Common Core federal standards for math and English began. I want to talk about what Common Core is, who started it, and who it's benefiting. Common Core is a set of state standards and federal standards that have to do with achievement levels for math, English, science, social studies, and history. Now, these standards are supposed to be met by the time a student passes a grade, and the Common Core is supposed to be a way to make sure that no matter where you are in the United States, you're getting the same level of education. Again, another thing that on paper, it sounds really good. Why didn't it work out well? A couple of reasons. One of them is that the United States is a very big place, and there's a lot of diverse groups of people who have very different needs. You have inner city kids who go to school really as a daycare. I mean, they get no meals at home. Nobody's cleaning their clothing. A lot of times, the only person they see is at school. They go home and both of their parents are working. So the needs of a school like that versus a school where someone can afford to have mom stay at home and cook and clean and ask you how your day is when you get home from school is very different. And what the Common Core did was create a set of standards that was very easily achievable for some and almost impossible to achieve for others. There's another side of this, which is that at the same time as Common Core became popular, Pearson and College Board really started pushing state standardized tests and the SAT and ACT. In the past, these were just competency tests. They were tests you took just to get funding for college. But what they are now is the be-all, end-all. They're the tests that decide which schools get funding and which schools close. And when you couple that with the state standards and the state curriculums and the federal standards and the federal curriculums, you have a way for the state to leverage itself against schools in poorer areas. And that's really what happens. Areas that service kids who have less money, less resources, tend to do worse on standardized tests, even year over year. I could link to studies showing you this. In fact, I probably will before I post this. The fact of the matter is, the Common Core state standards really don't serve the neediest and most fragile communities in the United States. That's a shame because they were made with the intention to help them, but that's not what they did. What we currently have is an education system where teachers are teaching to these tests, they're teaching to these state and federal standards, and I think very few people understand what these standards are, and even fewer people agree with them. I think that by and large, they are an attempt at doing something noble, but I think that this is a good example of someone trying to help someone when they don't really understand the kind of help that they need. Alan Watts, who's a great philosopher and someone I consider a teacher of mine, once said, "Kindly help me or you'll drown," said the monkey to the fish as he carried it up a tree. You have a bunch of people at the federal level who are trying to do something good, and they had good intentions, but that's not quite the way that it's panning out. Now, Trump and the Republicans want to end public education. In fact, it's not so far stretched to say they want to get rid of public education. I don't believe that's a good thing, but again, I am a public school teacher. So if you asked a public school teacher, should there be public education, most of them will say yes because it's their job, but I also say yes because there was a time in this country when there was no public school. And kids, when they got old enough, usually at around the age of 6 or 7, would work in a coal mine. Now, there's a world where that happens, and it's one that the Republicans are fighting for. They want kids back in factories. In the states where Republicans are winning the elections, they're lowering the age of consent to work to around the age where kids are, 10, 11 years old, or sometimes even younger. That's one world where kids work in factories. And that's already a world that kids all over the globe live in. Kids in China, kids in Bangladesh, kids in Vietnam. We've already been down that road, and we know where it goes. It doesn't really give people the chance to live a good life. And we know that. The other road is to fix what's broken and go from there. Now, we have Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. I don't know as much about Harris's views on education, but Tim Walz fought in his home state of Wisconsin for students to get free meals at school. And as silly as it sounds, lots of kids show up to school hungry. He was a public school teacher and a coach for many years. So to touch back on this election that's coming up, it's in your hands. Gen Z is going to be the one who decides this. You can choose free school lunches and a public education that, again, is not perfect, probably will never be perfect, but is usually better than nothing. Or we can start turning back the clock on child labor laws and have kids back in coal mines. So this is entirely up to you. You are the deciding voice. You're the one who's going to get to say what happens in the future. I'm just here to tell you my side of things because there's no news station that lets a public school teacher get on and say their piece. Just like last time, my email, if any of you want to reach out to me and share your experiences in the education system, I would love to hear what you have to say. My email's endlessdigitalwater@gmail.com. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope you're doing well. And I'll see you soon. Bye.